Everyone, we're going to begin. Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our program in about 1 minute. If you please take your seats, thank you. It's on now. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Live programming. If everyone would please take their seats, that'd be great. We're going to start our program right now. Good morning. I'll try again. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sarah Cott, Senior Vice President of Programming at The Hill, and thank you all for joining us in person and online today. And thank you for our program, Enhancing Energy Efficiency, How Technology is Cutting Carbon Emission. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Samsung Electronics America, for their support of this discussion and this wonderful space. We're here today just days after the conclusion of the UN Climate Summit in Dubai, where they agreed to transition away from fossil fuels at COP28. There was clear agreement around today's topic of energy efficiency, as countries pledged to double the annual rate of energy efficiency improvements every year until 2030. So what can Americans do to tackle climate change and alter their carbon footprint? How can new trends and technologies accelerate the impact of energy efficiency as a low-cost resource for cutting carbon emissions? And what climate progress has been made since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act almost a year and a half ago? We will answer those questions and more. But before we get underway, a few housekeeping rules. Please put your phones on silent if you're in the room with us, but feel free to join the conversation online at The Hill events using the hashtag TheHillEnergy. And with that, I am delighted to welcome Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill, and he will be joined by our first guest, Carla Frisch, Principal Deputy Director of the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Policy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. Carla, thanks for joining us. I know you're just getting over some jet lag coming back from Dubai. Let's start there. What were your takeaways from COP28? Any surprises?
Well, thanks to you and thanks to the Hill and Samsung for having us here. So COP28, I think we've just heard there were some big announcements coming out about the future across the globe. But for energy efficiency in particular, this commitment, a global commitment to double energy efficiency by 2030. And actually here in the US, we are really making progress on that already. Mm-hmm. The International Energy Agency said that this year we actually have a 4% improvement in energy efficiency in the US.
And is that higher than anticipated?
I'd say it's part of the results we are already seeing from the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. Mm-hmm. We're really already seeing changes on the ground across the US.
And where are we? As Sarah mentioned, it's amazing. It's been about a year and a half since the IRA passed. Where are we? One on implementation and big picture on President Biden's. He's got some ambitious climate goals. Where are we on those?
Where are we on those? So one of the things, if you look at the total emissions in the U.S. and the trajectory that we were on before these historic laws passed, and then after the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, of course, for semiconductors, also important for efficient appliances, and the Inflation Reduction Act, that actually puts the U.S. on a trajectory to get a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is about double where we were headed before those laws became into being.
And as far as people watching, people in the room, people on the live stream, how can they get involved in the effort? Because some people say, it's such a, when you're talking about the climate and climate change, it's just, they want something tangible. What can they do to help? What are the role of both consumers, but also stakeholders?
Absolutely. So energy efficiency, of course, is a direct opportunity for all of us. So one of the bipartisan investments in the Weatherization Assistance Program at DOE offers a historic level of investment for low-income Americans to weatherize the home. So tighten up what we call the shell of the building and how much air is transferring so it stays warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So that, first things first, I think for low-income folks to check and see if they're eligible for that Weatherization Assistance Program. Now, we do have a historic set of energy efficiency tax credits. We've historically had some energy efficiency tax credits, but with the IRA, those have been greatly expanded, and they're available for 10 years. So consumers can start now and start to plan, okay, what kind of changes might I want to make to my apartment, to my house? Starting with an energy audit, and you can now get a tax credit for doing an energy audit to have a professional help you figure out how can I improve the efficiency of my home. You can get a tax credit for insulation for doors and windows. You could get $1,200 for that, up to $2,000 for an efficient heat pump for heating and cooling your home, up to $2,000 for an efficient hot water heater. So, and these are opportunities that folks can plan for over time, because there used to be a cap, a lifetime cap, which is no longer in place. So homeowners, renters can start now and think about what are the changes they want to make over those 10 years.
Internationally, coming from Dubai, a lot of people focus on what Congress is doing here and domestic politics, but obviously this is a global problem. What are the concerns there with other countries? Some were pleased with what came out of Dubai, some were not. But you're not just working with policymakers in the United States, which is hard enough. You're working with global leaders.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about the Conference of the Parties is for anything to come out of it, you do have to have full agreement.
Right.
So all of those countries were on board. And the process of it is just really fascinating. It's a massive room full of negotiators from around the world. And they're essentially looking like you and I would look at a document of track changes and say, do we agree to this change and why and not? So particularly interesting to see some of the low-lying coastal countries who are already feeling the impacts of climate change. Of course, we all are, with more frequent storm events, with more extreme temperatures. But for those countries that are really feeling that now, there's a lot of urgency from them to act. And I have to say, I was really proud to be there as an American, because we were able to bring to the table and say, for years, you've been telling us to take action, and here we are with a really historic level of action from the U.S.
And speaking of the historic action, how does the government, when you talk about whether it's infrastructure or the IRA, CHIPS bill, the implementation of that, are there a lot of interagency task force? Because a lot of agencies are involved in all of this.
Absolutely. Yes, interagency task force sounds boring, but it's something that we love to do across the government. We have a coordination, for example, with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is offering energy efficiency opportunities to rural cooperatives, with the Environmental Protection Agency, who is thinking about how to use energy efficiency in our power plants across all of our systems, with the Department of Transportation, who thinking historically about energy efficiency in cars and opportunities to improve our transport. So it really is a whole of government effort on implementation and really a whole of society effort to get to the US goals that we're headed towards.
Just going back to what you saw in Dubai, had you seen anything like that before? Was that your kind of first experience on international stage to see how the decision making is made? And it sounds a little tedious as opposed to, that exciting.
Right. Well, I've seen it before. I'd say tedious, but by necessity, right? Because when the whole world is coming together to make a decision about where we're headed, you've got to really do the work of having countries be able to have their voice, have coalitions of countries come together. But I'd say overall, the feel, the sentiment is one of progress, particularly with what the U.S. is bringing to the table. It was in past COPs that I've been to, there might have been a sense of malaise of, are we really getting there? But this one in particular, being from the U.S. and the conversations that involve the U.S. had just a real level of new enthusiasm.
And as far as environmental justice, as all this implementation will go on for years, how much of a factor is that in implementation of equity?
Right. Environmental justice and equity and also quality jobs and family-sustaining jobs are really some of the underpinning for how we in the federal government and at Department of Energy are thinking about how we implement our programs. So we're thinking hard about, who are those communities that have heard about the benefits of the clean energy transition but haven't quite felt that yet. And I think one of the big opportunities is actually coming soon is a rebate program out of the Department of Energy through state and tribal governments. And those rebates are targeted, it's basically like a cashback or on-the-spot rebate instead of a tax credit. Because to get a tax credit, of course, you have to pay taxes enough that you would get a credit on those taxes. But if you don't pay that much taxes, you have this opportunity for rebates. And there's different types of rebates for a whole home rebate for whole home efficiency, and then also rebates for particular efficient appliances, efficient heat pump that does heating and cooling, efficient hot water, and efficient induction stove. And for a low-income family, you can actually get up to $14,000 in those rebates.
Mm-hmm. On the historic agreement in Dubai, what are you watching next? There have been questions about enforcement. What should, I'm not an energy expert, but looking at in a way that people can understand, what should be people watching post-agreement? Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's enforcement, there's tracking. So we have the commitment to doubling energy efficiency.
Right.
There's also a commitment to tripling renewable energy, and then globally tripling nuclear energy. So behind the scenes from the COP, there's all kinds of international coordination that happens throughout the year, planning and thinking through those commitments. So we'll be doing that at the Department of Energy through our International Affairs Office. But I think what really matters is the action that countries, their governments, their citizens are taking on the ground. So we are heads down focused on that implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and making sure the benefits from those pieces of legislation are going directly to Americans.
The world, as we know, is getting warmer, and some of the stats are pretty daunting. The need for air conditioning is projected to triple by 2050. And certainly some air conditioners are not as efficient as they could be. And it's not a trivial issue because it could really mean the difference between life or death, especially as we get closer to 2050. How does the government tackle those type of issues?
Right, so this is actually our bread and butter in the research and development work at Department of Energy and in our 17 national labs. For many, many decades, what we've been working on is thinking about that next generation of technologies. We've got great options for efficiency right now, and that's what those tax credits and rebates are all about, taking advantage of what we have now. But we're also investing in what's next. So one of those is in the heat pump, a poorly named heat pump, which does heating and cooling. Mm-hmm. And right now, that's a really efficient option all across the U.S. But we're looking at extreme cold temperatures, which can actually happen anywhere in the US, and doing the research to make sure those cold climate heat pumps are getting even better and better and highly efficient. We've also got our ABC initiative, Advanced Building Construction, because a lot of time we talk about the efficiency use of a building once it's built, but looking at the energy use of actually building it and seeing if we can do the construction in a much more efficient way that then ultimately helps the building be more efficient over the lifetime.
How does, some states have been very active in this space. How does that factor in? Obviously, the Inflation Reduction Act was a huge federal policymaking, but the states don't get the attention maybe they deserve.
Right. So a lot of the investments through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act actually go through state governments. States have something called a state energy office, which plans their own energy future. And I know we're going to hear from some states, all the M states later.
Yes, exactly. And they're applying for funds right now.
Yes.
I mean, that's basically how it works.
Yep. So Maryland in particular, you'll hear from later in the program. But the states, they have funding through their state energy offices to figure out their own plan for what does the energy future of their state look like. And one thing that state and local governments have unique control over is building codes. Mm-hmm. So they can figure out what's the best building code to provide efficiency for the residents in their jurisdiction. And what we do at the national level is help provide information and options for them to then choose what works best at their state and local government.
There's a lot going on in the world right now. I just want to end on a positive note. Where do you see progress being made over the next 5 to 10 years? Are you optimistic?
I feel the most optimistic I've felt in my life, actually. Okay. It's pretty amazing what's happening right now in the energy space in the U.S. And one thing, I think an untold story about that is in the manufacturing space. Just the last 2 years, we've had over 160 billion in new or expanded factories that manufacture clean energy. So that could be solar, batteries, offshore wind, here across the U.S. And we have a map on the DOE website that shows where those factories are, and it's just really all over the U.S. So it's not only about the options for clean energy, energy efficiency, for improving people's health and reducing their bills, but it's also about the job opportunity and the community development opportunity of building these technologies right here at home. And anybody that wants to get more into that, on the energy.gov website, we've got energy.gov/save that goes through all the tax credit opportunities, and then energy.gov/invest, which shows these factories being built out.
On other shows, people plug their books or movies. We plug government websites.
Energy.gov.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We've run out of time, Carla. Thanks for joining us. Please thank Carla for joining us this morning. And I hand it back to Sarah. Thank you so much.
Now it's time for our sponsor perspective portion of our program. Please welcome Mark Newton, Head of Corporate Sustainability at Samsung Electronics America, in conversation with Joe Ruffalo, General Manager of The Hill.
Morning, Mark. Thank you so much for being here today.
Morning, Joe. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. Why don't we just jump right in and tell us a little bit about what Samsung's doing for its strategy around sustainability and what some of your goals are.
Sure. So sustainability, for us, it's a business imperative. It's really, if you think about it, our business is a three-legged stool, right? We're focused on the financial health of our business. We're focused on our customers and our employees. And we also have to be focused on some things that are, let's say, externalities that maybe aren't very well characterized. And if we don't focus on all of those three very carefully, we're not going to be able to sit on the stool, right? So it's a big part. And the other big part for us is we're an innovation engine. And sustainability for us is really a lens for innovation. It helps us to develop breakthrough products that we try to focus on without any compromise in terms of performance. So our biggest sort of North Star approach towards this is a commitment to net zero carbon by 2050 for our entire business worldwide. And that sounds pretty far out there, but for a company like ours, as diverse as ours, with semiconductors and consumer electronics, it's really, I think, a very challenging target. And we've pulled that even further for our equipment business, which are a lot of the products that you all know. So our networking, our consumer electronics, our display business, our mobile products, and the home appliances, including the most efficient home appliances, which are now hopefully going to be available to consumers even more broadly through the Inflation Reduction Act incentives.
That's great. Can you share more about Samsung's sustainability efforts and how other companies can take note and hold themselves accountable as well?
Sure. I think that what's really important for how it works for us is not to lose sight of the G in ESG, the governance part of it. It's critical. So being able to set very clear goals, having accountability towards those goals, and a sensing mechanism for how those things are going and corrective actions in order to correct those. That's true in our own operations as well as in our supply chain. So that's extremely important. Another really important aspect is partnerships and collaboration. And so events like this, which are sort of the tip of the spear, and all the stuff that happens underneath that in order to get us to a place like this, to use our voice. Building trust is essential for us to be successful and to engage our customers. And that brings into the last piece, which is really a customer focus. Delivering our products without compromise, at the same time bringing our customers along.
How does the energy efficiency of tech products really contribute to climate mitigation?
Well, it's as much the stuff that you see as the stuff you don't see. Think about all the semiconductors and memory products that we build that go into all of the products that we're used to, and we don't really even think about what's inside of them. The memory products that are powering the cloud, that are enabling AI and 5G, the network equipment that is connecting our country, underserved parts of our population to have the connectivity and raise productivity. These are all things that are in the background. And that's sort of the first level of impact, and it's much larger than things that we can do on our own with our own equipment. On top of that, the industries that are served by that, right? The cloud sector, storage sector, agriculture, some very important sectors in terms of climate impact, we're helping to drive efficiencies through our products as well. And then lastly, with the consumer, trying to make efficiency as ubiquitous and invisible as possible. I mean, it should really be like I think a gift with purchase, and it should go across all price points. It shouldn't just be on the ones with the highest margins and the flagship products. And so that's our philosophy. And that's what helps us to drive our product roadmap.
You mentioned a couple, but what role does technology play in helping other industries with their sustainability goals?
Well, I think I touched on that just now. Some things to think about. I think when companies are getting involved in this, there is an initial rush to talk about all the great things that you're doing, right? I think that's good, but then building trust, I think, is the most important aspect. And so besides the governance aspect I talked to before, if you don't bring everyone else along and you do it in a credible and transparent way, then you're not going to be able to have the public confidence that you need with the investment community, with your consumers, and with your business partners to actually make change. Greenwashing is the root of all evil here, overstating what it is you're able to do, right? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Yeah, thank you. Under promising and over delivering. That's what we're all trying to do here. But at the same time, green hushing is the opposite problem. And so we all need to use our voice, and we all need to work together here. And that's really, I think, finding that balance in between the two to have a credible discussion with consumers and stakeholders is what's important.
The Inflation Reduction Act was a big step forward for the climate, but what else do you think that policymakers here today and others listening should be focusing on next?
Well, I think that the Inflation Reduction Act is really the thing that's going to help us to deliver real impact to this country in a way that hasn't been done before. I mean, $8.8 billion put into our sector to help to drive efficiency in ways that has never been done before. So I think that that's really important, and lining up our products like our induction cooktops, our heat pump dryers and AC systems, and then also being able to leverage some of the AI and connectivity opportunities that we have, like with our SmartThings products, and I think is really going to what's going to accelerate the opportunity with the IRA. Going forward with that, though, it's really all about using that in order for us as a society to move forward in a more efficient way. And so all those other things around transition to renewables, circularity, and avoiding waste, those are all really key initiatives, and they all roll up into a larger carbon strategy that we have.
How can companies eliminate potential barriers for consumers to live sustainability? Affordability is obviously one of those, but what else could be done?
Well, I think we need to make it easy, right? I talked about it as a gift with purchase. It really has to be, first of all, easy. And so if we go back to the IRA, this can't be complicated. We talked about how it's going to be, implemented by the states. If that's done in a way which is inconsistent, then it's going to be very confusing for consumers to be able to adopt that. So that's one of the reasons why we're a big proponent for driving harmony into the implementation. The other thing is trade-off, right? So with innovation, oftentimes comes trade-off. We need to break the paradigm that was set years ago that when you have sustainability elements into your product, you're somehow losing something. And so we look at this kind of as a Venn diagram, and it's that intersection point in between where we're exciting customers with new innovations, at the same time doing it responsibly.
That's great. What's one big takeaway that you'd like to leave the audience with today about Samsung's sustainability efforts?
Just that efficiency is kind of the redheaded stepchild of climate change, right? I am so glad that we're all here and we're talking about this topic. It's really been an underserved aspect of our solution set. And so everything that we can do to dial up the message around efficiency, and I mean efficiency writ large. Efficiency is energy efficiency, it's also resource efficiency. And I think that's really what drives our programs. That's the focal point for our operations and really the message that needs to get out there. And I'm really glad that the COP had a focus on that this time. The more that we can start talking about that, the better. Whether you agree with climate change or not, you can't disagree with avoiding waste. And so it's one of those things that's an easy conversation to have with everyone, and it's the right thing to do. I hope I'm wrong about climate change. I really do. But if we do everything we need to do to be efficient, then we're going to be in a better place no matter what.
Mark, thank you so much for your insights and for all the work that Samsung's doing.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Joe. And thank you again to Samsung for their support of today's program. Now please welcome back Bob, who is joined by the distinguished panel to discuss the topic of empowering energy efficiency.
Thank you.
Paula Glover, President of Appliance to Save Energy. Steve Nadell, Executive Director of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. Rose Stephan Booker, Director of State Mobilization with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and Jamal Lewis, Director for State and Local Policy for the Mid-Atlantic and South, with Rewiring America. Bob?
Why don't we start by going just briefly, kind of introing yourself and also your group's mission.
Okay, sure. So I'll start.
You start.
So good morning. My name is Paula Glover. I'm the president of the Alliance to Save Energy, and we are a bipartisan coalition of business, environmental organizations, academia, government, and others who are really just interested in federal advocacy around energy efficiency policy.
Steve?
Yes. I'm Steve Nadell. I'm the executive director at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, ACAAA. We are a research, education, and policy organization that works throughout the country, state, local level, as well as nationally. on technologies, programs, and policies to save energy.
Hi, good morning. Rose Steffens Booker. I'm the Director of State Mobilization with the Building Decarbonization Coalition. We are charting a course to eliminate fossil fuels from buildings. We do that in a multi-pronged approach using policy, market transformation, consumer engagement, and we even have an in-house chef who goes around and teaches other chefs how to talk about really cool kitchen efficient products.
Yeah, I'm Jamal Lewis. I'm Director of State and Local Policy for the Mid-Atlantic and South everywhere in America. We are dedicated to improving the consumer experience, making it as easy as possible for consumers to choose the best possible machines on the market. Our homes.rewiringamerica.org website is a one-stop shop helping consumers navigate and understand the incentives that could be available to them, as well as helping to educate consumers on why electric is better, more affordable, and more efficient.
Speaking of efficiency, your group has a state energy efficiency calculator. Can you describe that?
Yeah, so when the Inflation Reduction Act passed last year, we launched our Inflation Reduction Act savings calculator. The IRA has a plethora of incentives for consumers. You heard Carla earlier talk about that, to help consumers improve the quality of their lives. Our calculator is dedicated to ensuring that consumers understand what could be available to them and help them navigate that web of incentives. So we launched that last year, and since then it's been used over 600,000 times. And just last week we launched a 2.0 version, a pilot in the state of Rhode Island, also tying in state and local incentives that could be available for Rhode Islanders.
Paula, you mentioned your group is bipartisan.
Yes.
How hard is that nowadays?
I guess it depends on what you're working on.
Okay.
I would say, we at the Alliance are blessed. We have an honorary board of advisors that's bipartisan, bicameral. They have been in existence for more than 45 years. So I think from our perspective, it works really well. It's harder and it takes longer. But I would argue it's also far more sustainable and long-lasting when you take that kind of time. And so, we are committed to efficiency and doing it in that way, trying to bring others along and really find collaboration and agreement with our solutions.
But as a follow-up, because in Washington you don't see a lot of bipartisanship, but outside the Beltway, is there more than most people would think?
I mean, I think, yes, but I also think that there's probably more than people think in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just depends on the issue,
Right.
And who you're talking to and how you're talking about it and when you're talking about it. All of those things, I think, matter. And so I think people would be surprised at the federal level that bipartisanship still does exist around issues, as well as at the state and local level.
Steve, energy efficiency can be overlooked as an overall strategy. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
It's not quite as visible generally. It's insulation in the walls. It's efficient appliances or efficient lights that people don't stare at. It's not like a solar collector or something. But it's working day in and day out, particularly when the weather is really cold or really hot. It's absolutely essential.
Rose, regarding states, Washington is very focused on federal policy making, but there's a lot of activity in the states. Are there states that you think are leading the way that should be viewed as an example for others?
Well, there are many states that have already been doing a lot of work on energy efficiency and fighting climate change at large. The Building Decarbonization Coalition has worked hand in hand with the state of California. We're also doing a lot of work in New York. And those two coastal states have certainly led the way, as all of us know. But we are trying to turn our focus on other states who are trying to chart pathways and models to help consumers save money, save energy, and put really efficient products into their home to make it safer and healthier.
I have to ask you to elaborate on the chef.
Oh,
So
yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, we are so excited and privileged and honored to have a chef in-house. We learned through some polling that consumers really do see chefs at the restaurant or the cooks in the home and the heart of the house, the kitchen, as the trustworthy source of information. And so we said, well, why not bring one in-house to tell us how to talk about food, how to connect, because we all connect around the dinner table. We all connect around, I would say, our kitchen islands. So our chef, Rochelle, she goes around, she encourages other chefs to talk about specifically induction cooking and how that can be really safe and healthy for homes, particularly families that suffer from asthma, as well as really efficient and really saving the family money and time. I've got a toddler at home. I have saved myself many toddler meltdowns by the fact that I can boil my water really, really quickly with an induction cooktop. And so you guys might not be able to see it, but I wear my Supermom cape in the back. And, induction cooktop has really helped me on that one.
Jamal, takeaways, and I want to go down the line here on COP28. It was some intense negotiations.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really great to see the commitments to double energy efficiency and to also scale up renewable energy development and installation. I think it was also really great I think it was also notable that one of the phrases that was included in the pledge was a commitment to transition away from fossil fuels in our energy system in a just, orderly, and equitable way. And I think it's really important as we are talking about energy efficiency that we recognize that electrification is energy efficiency. It's the transition to highly efficient electric technologies that result in savings.
Steve, your take on COP28?
Yes, I was very happy to see the fossil fuel transition beginning, but I was particularly excited by doubling energy efficiency. We really need that. ACEEE finds that energy efficiency can get us halfway to the Paris Pledge to total decarbonization. It's very good that it looks like this year U.S. will have hit the 4% mark. That was partly due to IRA and other programs, partly due to weather. We need to make it hit that mark each and every year, so we're really going to have to do even more to keep hitting that pledge. And I'm glad that they pledged it. And we, and I'm imagining everybody else here, will try to hold the U.S. accountable for that pledge.
Paula, is the pledge enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pledge is really the right first step, and then it's about the work. And I think to Steve's point, weather has a lot to do with how successful we are right now. And so we do need to really keep our eye on the ball if we're talking about doubling efficiency. I had the pleasure of being at COP, and so originally it was actually doubling efficiency year over year. Mm-hmm. A little bit of that got lost, so now we're just doubling, but I think we do have to be really, really focused on this. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would add is that we talk a lot about the rebates and the money that's coming out of DOE, incredibly important. I don't want us to lose sight of what's happening at EPA with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And the fact that efficiency is named an enabling technology before you do solar and other things is actually equally important. That's $27 billion. And so we don't want to forget about that level of investment that's coming out.
Rose, your thoughts, analysis coming out of COP?
As someone who's also been at COP, incremental steps. We all know that sitting up here with the energy efficiency movement, but I've seen the transformative power of this movement, and so COP by COP, we'll see more and more pledges, more and more, I would say, activative goals and objectives to really bring us forward and really fight climate change.
This is for anybody who wants to take it, but I want to talk about the private sector and the role it plays when it comes to new technologies, which obviously in every event we have, we're always talking about AI in the future, and that scares some people, but there's a lot of promise there as well. Anyone want to take that, the role of the private sector and how it intersects with obviously government regulators?
Sure, I'll start.
Go ahead.
I can go.
So, private sector is extremely important. I want to just highlight the fact that the Department of Energy, and we heard Carla earlier, put out $169 million in resources through the Defense Production Act to accelerate the deployment of heat pumps. And what that tells me is that even though we already have highly efficient technologies, we're continuing to innovate and continuing to find more ways to be more effective which is ultimately going to help us achieve these goals that we're setting out.
Yeah, I'd also like to add, we've seen the power of public and private partnerships for many years. Our wonderful friends, Samsung, they are partners with the EPA's Energy Star program, which is a really powerful brand that encourages consumers to purchase energy efficient products. I'm really proud to say that we've worked with Samsung for many years, and we're going to continue to do so because they are part of the market transformation. They know the consumers that are out there and what they want and how to talk to them. And so in partnership with successful brands like Energy Star, with successful brands like Samsung, and with our work and relationships with states and federal governments, we're doing this together. It's a really great, I would say, synergy moment for us.
Yeah, I would add, we really, the private sector is essential. Government is kind of the icing or pump priming, if you will, but most of the capital is going to have to come from the private sector. I'll just give one example. In the Inflation Reduction Act, there is an industrial demonstration program. There's $6 billion for advanced technologies. How do we develop the next wave of technologies, whether it's decarbonized aluminum, steel, cement, chemicals, et cetera? This will help poise the U.S. to be a leader internationally in these vital industries. When they open it up, there's about $6 billion there. They got, the proposals included more than $100 billion of private capital. Not everybody's going to win. Frankly, that's top of my list for some additional funding, but there's going to be far more private capital coming in for these new cutting edge plants than there is government funding.
Paula, what would you like to see policymakers do next?
I think what I'd like to see policymakers do is two things. One, what are the measures that we're going to use to make sure that we are successful, and how frequently are we going to start measuring success? So it's my opinion, certainly, that if we wait until 2030, 2040, 2050 to see if the policies that we put in place today work or not, we are way too late. And so kind of understanding as we're moving through this process, what success looks like, what the markers are, in particular around the priorities around our community benefit plans. And so these plans that have now been funded, are they working the way that we think they are? And how do we need to pivot? I think we need to prioritize that. And then I think to the larger point, right, this is about public and private partnership. This is not something that I think the government taxpayer dollars can spend its way out of. But it can certainly help create opportunities for lots of people. And so in our sense of urgency around climate, we also, I think, have to take the time to make sure that we are bringing people along. And we're bringing all communities along, and that we recognize that the infrastructure in every community is not the same. And so that there are communities today that are ready to go with all the technology that Samsung has to offer and others, and we want to see that rapid adoption. At the same time that we see that, we also want to see us investing what we need to so that those communities that are going to take a little bit more time, they're ready to go, right, in 3 to 5 years. And so I think those two things at the same time.
Jamal, where are we on environmental justice? It's a huge issue. It's only going to become bigger in the decades ahead.
Environmental justice is you're right, it's a huge issue. There are communities across the world, across the country, that are disproportionately impacted by climate change, disproportionately impacted by other societal issues. Fortunately, the administration has a Justice 40 initiative, which is dedicated to ensuring that investments go to those communities that are more impacted. And I think that's really important. But now, to the point that was just made by Paula, it's really important that we are sort of taking the steps from the infrastructure law, from the Inflation Reduction Act, those investments, and taking it to the next level to ensure that everyone has access to them. And I think it's going to take really intentional effort that we're seeing, from the folks up here, that we're seeing from the federal government, and we everywhere in America are dedicated to seeing that happen.
Rose, where would you like to see policymakers go? Because obviously everyone in this space, whether it's big agreements like the one in Dubai or the Inflation Reduction Act, but there is really no finish line.
Yeah, I would love policymakers to square in on the fact that we need to make these products, these efforts, this money accessible, and equitable. And I think we say those words all the time, but we really forget what that means. That means bringing people from behind to the starting line. That means investing more money and more time and more resources to helping folks who have never had these opportunities in the past. And I just want us to square in on that and work together to make sure that we are helping all people, all communities, and bringing people to the starting line.
Steve, I'll give you the last word. We've got about a minute left.
Okay, no, I'll just pick up on that. Yes, we have to help all communities. I'm very happy that DOE has decided that 40% of the home energy rebates needs to be in low-income communities, another 10% in multifamily. Multifamily is particularly challenging. How do we really make sure that these funds help all communities? And I also think we need more attention to fence line communities. Environmental justice originally was based on pollution and the fact that a lot of these communities are right next to polluting factories and they have health problems. How can we use this to really focus much more on fence line communities, which tend to also be low-income communities?
That 20 minutes went very fast. Please thank our expert panel for joining us this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks. Good stuff.
Next, we're excited to welcome Congressman Tim Walberg of Michigan, who will be joining Bob for a special discussion on U.S. energy security and how it relates to today's topic on energy efficiency. Welcome, Congressman.
Hey, Congressman. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you.
So let's start with some news of the day. Is any hope for a supplemental bill, or is that basically going to be punted until January? And you guys are expected in the House to leave this week, is that right?
We'll be leaving today.
You'll be, yeah. Okay. So what do you think of where do we go when you come back?
We go back into a debate format, starting out debate within the Republican conference itself.
Right.
That's a challenge, and I will prognosticate that ultimately we will get a supplemental.
Okay.
When we do that remains to be seen.
Do you think it'll be wrapped up in the government funding bill, or do you think it'll be two separate kind of deals, or remains to be seen?
I don't have wings on, do I?
Get out your crystal ball.
I just came from the bipartisan prayer breakfast, but I don't have any. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what the president wants to achieve in the sense of reality. Mm-hmm. The House is not going to move a direction, for instance, without securing the border, without language in there. Any other funding, whether it be for Ukraine, whether it be for defense, whether it be for energy issues, remains to be seen. So when you have a 2-vote majority in the majority, mm-hmm. and when I was at COP last weekend, and we were talking about doing snowboarding down sand dunes out in the desert, I reminded my Republican colleagues that if we lost any member or two, we'd be in the minority.
Speaker Jeffries, yes.
And so John Curtis is a good snowboarder. He made it alive, but we kept everybody else from doing it. I can't. It's tough to tell you.
Yeah.
Because it's been such a crazy time. We had a reception for Kevin McCarthy last night. Why? Why should we be in that situation? But without getting too negative at Christmas time, it's going to be a challenge. But ultimately, it has to get done. We'll find a way to get it done.
Okay, so you've written and you've advocated for energy security and reliability. But what does that mean? Can you explain?
To me, it means living in Michigan, doing what Michigan has done for years. And that's an all-of-the-above energy plan. If you look at Michigan, we're surrounded by water. No salt, no biting fish. Beautiful opportunities. In my district alone, on Lake Michigan, which is the western edge of my district, we have Cook Nuclear Plant. On the eastern edge, which is Lake Erie, I have the Fermi plant. We have the second largest coal-fired plant in North America, sitting there in Monroe County on Lake Erie. We have gas-powered plants. We have solar fields being developed all over, acres and acres of farm ground being turned into solar fields. In Hillsdale County, if you know anything about Hillsdale College, the conservatism there, the county's the same. Windmills are all over Hillsdale County. That's just a microcosm of what Michigan is. And I like to think that that is an example to the rest of the world, let alone the country, of what we ought to be doing, where it works, how it works, what works best, and continuing, as we talked about in Dubai, and meeting with the president of COP28. It was amazing for me to hear a guy that is fully invested in fossil fuels talking about an all-of-the-above plan that lifts countries around the world up toward meeting emission standards. And when he said, bottom line, all of us, the key issue is emissions and reducing emissions to get toward that 1.5 degree, to get where we need to go. But we know that there are countries that can't do it, like the UAE or the United States. We don't have the resources aren't there. So what about thinking about moving them where they can, and then from there developing further? I like that. And in our case, I'm a strong pusher for nuclear power. I think we're capable of doing it. If you just look at what took place last winter, following the Ukraine war taking off, I was in Brussels a year and a half ago, just before, in fact, the week the Ukraine war broke out. We were there meeting with the parliamentarians, and they were talking about all that they were doing in renewable energy, and then when we'd ask the question, knowing the answer, ask the question, but what about dispatchable energy? What about base load? They said, oh, we got that taken care of. Well, they had it taken care of because they were getting the resources from Russia. Well, that all changed by the end of that week. And Germany was burning wood last year, and France was going on just fine with nuclear energy. And so I think we need to take all of that into consideration. Michigan is right now going the opposite direction, sadly. We're being pushed by our administration, our governor and administration in Michigan to go away from fossil fuels, not pushing for nuclear, though our governor has given assent to the Palisades plant being redeveloped and redeployed with advanced nuclear energy. But last week she made a decree that all of the state vehicles will be EV by 2024. That's an aggressive push towards something that we're not quite prepared for yet.
And you, like other Republicans, voted against the IRA.
Yeah.
What's been the effect in Michigan? There have been reports of a lot of clean energy jobs. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons why Republicans cite, because it was such a massive bill, healthcare, energy. But is it those mandates that you say?
It's the mandates. Yeah. That's a key. I don't think any of us, the fact that I've been to COP 2 years now, as part of the Energy and Commerce Committee this year, a bipartisan CODEL that went there, but also it included the Conservative Climate Caucus, of which I'm a member. And in fact, right now, it's the second largest caucus in the Republican conference. We believe in being good stewards of resources. We believe that innovation will bring us to a place that we all want to be. I think we all want to see the emissions reduced. We all want to leave our country for our grandkids. That's said as a grandparent, I forget about my kids, except I'm glad I didn't kill them because they gave me grandkids. But I want to leave it better. I truly do. But I don't want the mandates, because as I look back through history, the United States has progressed beyond any other place in the world because we've fostered innovation, the entrepreneurial spirit, saying if you build it, they will come. And if you build it right, Samsung, here we are today. I have 3 televisions in my holdings that all have Samsung on it, because I think, for myself, that it's smart enough as TVs go, for a guy like me to understand how to do it, and the quality is great. And now if Samsung doesn't keep up to it, I'm going to move to another one. But that doesn't come with a mandate, and I think that competition builds. And so in COP, what we saw, comparison to 3 years ago when the Conservative Climate Caucus first started showing up, and people were aghast. I remember last year we met with John Kerry. He kind of looked at us as saying, what are you, non-striped zebras or what? I mean, Conservative Climate Caucus, I never heard of anything like that. But it developed a relationship with Secretary Kerry that has continued on, and we're talking about it. And he's come on board more strongly than ever before for nuclear energy. And I think that's where it comes, not by mandates, but by heads getting together and saying, how do we innovate to a point that we meet the concerns of emissions, we continue to reduce, but we give people the choice. That's why my CARS Act, and Senator Kerry and I don't agree on the CARS Act, and we talked about that at COP. And the climate czar at the White House gave me a total dissertation on why I was wrong. And I'm looking forward to having another opportunity to speak with Ali. But that's, I think, where it will happen. As we innovate, as we offer opportunities, as we offer competition, and as we say in the end, we're all going to the same place. All going to the same place. Emissions, reduction, sustainability, progress for everyone, lifting up as opposed to holding back in any way, shape, or form.
So you have an open dialogue now with John Kerry. Obviously, you don't agree on everything, but
we agree on some things.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the beauty of it. And when he heard my story about John Dingell and Sergio Marchionne of Daimler Chrysler, the late Sergio Marchionne, talking about CAFE standards that were coming out at that time, first and foremost, John Kerry didn't think I looked old enough to be back with those guys. No, that wasn't the case. But I said, you know, what I learned from them sitting as a newly minted freshman member of Congress, listening to the great John Dingell give his dissertation about why we're doing those CAFE standards. This is back in 2007. And Sergio Marchionne sitting there in his black outfit. You could see almost a cigar sticking out, but it wasn't. And after John Dingell had given the plan, I'll never forget Marchionne saying in his Italian accent, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We think we can reach that. But all we ask is that once you give us this standard, please get out of the way. Mm-hmm. Don't tell us how to achieve it. Between our engineers, our designers, and our customers, and I caught that, and our customers, we will figure out how to do it. What engine will meet your goals and your standards? And that really hit home with me, because I think that's what Samsung does. I think that's what all of the great minds in industry, if we give them the chance, give them a reasonable goal to attain, and then get out of the way. We'll see what happens.
You have legislation, bipartisan bill with Congresswoman Rochester. What legislation are you working in this space that you think maybe could get done in this Congress?
In what specific space?
Just energy, climate space.
Well, I'm going to see the Pipes Act
right.
fully enacted. It's far safer than transporting flammables, et cetera, through our communities. As illustration, you know, when we shut down Keystone, that gave more opportunity for China to receive those heavy crude resources that we would have refined in our country and allowed us to have further energy dependence and to export LNG and other things to around the world. But that stopped. The lawsuit going on with Line 5 in Michigan that brings propane, natural gas, as well as petroleum from Canada across the Great Lakes, providing for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan the majority of their fuel source, both for agriculture as well as for heating their homes, and then back to Canada as well. And the Line 5 plan would make it much safer than the Line 5 that's been across the Straits of Mackinac since 1976, I think it's been. This would take it below the base of the lake, have a tunnel. We can put communications systems through there as well as energy systems. And so that's something we want to get across the line. The challenge is getting to that understanding, and I think that's again why that bipartisan codel that went across to COP this year is so important as we see places where we can work. I want to see permitting reform happen. I was just talking while waiting here about our discussion on a panel on permitting in Dubai, which is a bipartisan concern. Frank Pallone, Catherine Morris Rogers have much agreement on the need for permitting reform, the unnecessary cost. I brought up at Dubai in our panel that with the advent of AI, any of you heard about that? I'm picking up that there's something out there. But when we add costs to a project because of permitting, where AI could find out, plumb the depths of what's gone on in other projects, and all of a sudden we have, let's use Samsung again, coming to get a permit to do something amazing. Why go through the same hoops over and over again that we could say through AI, this is what another project had, this is what they offered as solution, it was acceptable, and it's the same as what Samsung is offering. Let's give the permit much more quickly. So I think there are things we can look at in the whole permitting process, because when you stop and think right now, just to get through NEPA, it's on average 4.7 years, 5 years. Then you add the transmission or transportation permits, then you add another 6 to 7 years. So now you've got a potential beyond 10 years. And investors look at that and say, I'm not going to have any idea of return for 10 years. Why do I want to invest in this? We can't have that happening. We have to speed things up because the rest of the world doesn't worry about the permits. China's not worrying about the permits at all. India's not worrying about the permits that we are. Russia certainly isn't worrying about it. We need to stay ahead. And so let's reduce those unnecessary costs. Not take away the protections. We don't want to do away with all the hoops. We want it to work right. But in the case of AI, maybe that's a tool we can use, and we discussed that, in fact, in our AI hearing in Energy and Commerce yesterday, with the AI brains in front of us, and they concurred that it could be very useful, as long as we still, as decision makers, remain as co-pilots alongside of AI, not just accepting AI, because there could be some mischief. But if we're co-pilots, like sitting on a plane, with decisions coming from technology, there's still that human saying, let me check that out. I think we could have some real benefit.
Well, Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Please, thanks. Well, thank you, Congressman. Next, we're pleased to welcome Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, co-chair of the Senate Climate Change Task Force, a regular at our events, co-author of the Green New Deal, and chair of the House Environment and Public Works Subcommittee, Senate, on clean air, climate, and nuclear safety. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Let me just start again with the news of the day. Can we avoid a government shutdown? Because it looks like the House, as the Congressman said, is leaving. There's no supplemental deal. What's your take on all that?
Well, I think the Republicans are experts on that. They're leaving town. So I guess they don't care if there's a government shutdown. I guess they're, content just to, walk away, wash their hands like Pontius Pilate, say, it's not my responsibility. But of course, at the same time, they call for bipartisanship. Let's work together. Let's solve these problems for the American people. And Merry Christmas, I'm going home. So they say it all in one paragraph. So I don't know the answer to it because that would require me to get inside the internal workings of the most radical right-wing cerebral mechanisms of the Republican caucus. And that's terrain I don't walk very comfortably and knowledgeably. But that's where the answer lies. It's in that part of the political spectrum right now because we want to solve the problems. We're ready to stay here to work until we pass the legislation necessary to have our country being one that's functioning and not having the rest of the world wondering what's going on.
Well, it seems like a deal is not imminent then. Tell us about your takeaways from COP28. We've been talking about a lot this morning. Obviously, it was touch and go at times. It was intense. What's your takeaway?
Well, I was there over the weekend. I left on Monday. The document that was on the table on Monday was just a whitewash by the host country, UAE, and by OPEC and the oil and gas industries of the world. We might as well have called the COP a cartel of oil producers, because that's what it was on Monday in that document.
Okay.
So because of John Kerry and other diplomats around the world, it's been improved, but it still doesn't call for a phase out of oil, gas, and coal.
Right.
It still doesn't set a deadline for making this transition. So it's a lot better than it was on Monday. It is progress, but there's still, from the perspective, especially of developing nations, especially island nations, especially countries that have the fossil fuel industry partnering with the leaders of that country, exploiting the natural resources of that country, endangering the lives of the people in that country. There's still a lot of additional work to do. But again, we have to measure progress by what we've seen this year, by this week rather, and they did come a long way since Monday, but we still have a long way to go. Greenhouse gases went up last year in the world. Greenhouse gases is going up this year in the world. And that's all we really have to know. There's no celebration here. There's no victory lap. There's no spiking the football in the end zone. We're still increasing greenhouse gases on the planet.
So what must happen now?
Well, now the United States has to be the leader. We have to show that we can do this.
Passage of the IRA was a big
We passed the IRA, and initially the CBO said that it would unleash $369 billion worth of federal investment.
Okay.
Now Goldman Sachs says it's going to unleash $1.2 trillion worth of federal investment, which could leverage upwards of $7, $8, $9 trillion worth of private sector investment simultaneously. I have a climate bank, which I was able to build into the bill for $20 billion. McKinsey says that's going to unleash $250 billion worth of private sector investment. But at the same time, the natural gas industry, the oil industry, they have a plan to export dramatically oil and gas from the United States around the world. Plans to build upwards of a couple of dozen LNG export facilities out of our nation, dramatically increasing greenhouse gases, not just here, but around the world. So it's a tale of two energy strategies.
Right.
On the one side, we are the global leader. That's what the IRA is. On the other hand, you can't preach temperance from a bar stool. You can't tell the rest of the world to stop their addiction to oil and gas, as the United States oil and gas industry is trying to build a global export market for domestic oil and gas. That is absolutely unacceptable. It's going to lead to a carbon bomb exploding across this planet, and you can't have it both ways. Right now, America is a split personality, and we just have to ensure that we're the leader part of that legacy and not the laggard.
You've reintroduced the Green New Deal. Obviously, the votes aren't there in the Senate or the House now. What's the future of that legislation?
Well, the IRA has the Green New Deal in its DNA. So when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced the Green New Deal just 5 years ago, the goal was to create a movement that would create the momentum, that would create the moment where Joe Biden could sign a bill which Goldman Sachs now says is going to unleash $1.2 trillion worth of public financing and $7 to $10 trillion worth of private sector investment. But it's not enough. We still need a Green New Deal for healthcare, a Green New Deal for education, a Green New Deal for cities. We have more work to do. And so, again, that's really the story here. And so we have to make sure that the last IRA is the second largest climate bill ever passed, because we're going to have to pass another one, which is why we have to win the House, the Senate, and the presidency in 2024, so we can just continue the progress which we've already made.
During the Obama administration, then Speaker Pelosi made clear to the Obama White House that she wanted to tackle climate before health care, and that's exactly what happened. Passed the House, as you remember. You were been a leader in the House and the Senate on this issue. It didn't pass the upper chamber, and the former speaker famously said she wants to save the planet. How can average Americans watching this right now save the planet?
Well,
or play their part.
Okay. Well, again, when Speaker Pelosi took over as Speaker, she named me as the chair
yes,
of the Climate Committee. In 2007, 8, 9, 10, we passed legislation to increase the fuel economy standards. In 2007, we passed the Waxman-Markey bill, which would have cut greenhouse gases dramatically. Matter of fact, the revolution would be largely over if it didn't then die in the Senate.
Right.
But the momentum has been dramatic, and everyone out there should know that if you're looking to buy an all-electric vehicle, the tax breaks are there. If you're looking at heat pumps, if you're looking at energy efficiency, if you're looking at new appliances, it's all there now. The incentives are there to move individuals, families, towards purchasing the most energy efficient appliances or vehicles or homes that we've ever seen in our country's history. So it's going to take individual actions, but cumulatively, it is moving in the right direction. So just going back to 2009, when Joe Biden was sworn in as vice president, we only had 2,000 all-electric vehicles in America. This year, we're going to sell more than 1 million. And the IRA is giving incentives for people to buy more. In 2009, we only had 2,000 megawatts of solar in the United States, total cumulative. This year, we're going to install 34,000 megawatts of solar in 1 year in our country. So that's how fast all of this is moving. We have to move even faster, given the fact that greenhouse gases are still going up, but there has been a dramatic sea change, and we just have to make sure that the United States is not flooding the rest of the world with oil and gas drilled for, fracked for here in the United States. We have to square up what we say we want to do with what we are actually doing in terms of addicting the rest of the world to LNG for the whole next generation.
As you know, when Donald Trump was elected president, Republicans went after Obamacare, tried to repeal it. It didn't work out. Are you concerned that if former President Trump or another Republican came into office and won in 2024, that the implementation of IRA would be negatively affected?
100%. When Donald Trump was asked, would you be a dictator? On day one, he says, absolutely. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to close down our border, and I'm going to drill, baby, drill. No environmental protections, no standards, no anything. So in January of this year, excellent question, then Speaker McCarthy, seems like ancient history already, so January, the first bill he put out on the floor, if anyone can remember it, we only talk about H.R. 2 now. We're up to H.R. 2, but H.R. 1 was a repeal of the IRA.
Right.
And it passed.
Yeah.
With all the Republicans voting to repeal the IRA. So just by making it H.R. 1, they signaled that in 2024, the first thing they do if they win is repeal the clean energy revolution. Repeal the tax breaks for wind, for solar, for batteries, for all electric vehicles in our society. So yes, the planet's on the ballot in 2024. All of the incentives to move towards a clean energy revolution, to create those millions of new jobs, it's on the ballot in 2024. And if Trump wins and they have the House and Senate, the first thing they're going to do is just say, drill, baby, drill. And when they say, oh, I believe in energy future, but it's all of the above. And when you translate that, kind of as an anagram, it comes out to oil above all, because that's what 2025 will be all about in the Trump administration. So young people in our country, or anyone that really cares about the safety of the planet and this clean energy revolution, they should know that they've got to get out and vote and make sure that Trump does not win the presidency.
Congressman Wahlberg mentioned that he doesn't have a problem with clean energy, but he does have a problem with mandates. Why are mandates so important?
Well, they're incentives. Okay, we had tax breaks for the oil and gas industry for 100 years. I heard no complaints from any of those oil and gas state proponents for 100 years. All of a sudden, we want to put on tax breaks for wind and solar, and they call it socialism. Oh, look at that, socialism. I watch Fox News every night. Green New Deal, socialism. And all I can say is, if you give me oil and gas and coal level subsidies for 100 years, we'll bury those ancient fossil fuel industries. Give us some of that socialism for the new technologies that you have enjoyed for the last 100 years. That's all we're asking for, is a level playing field. But they really don't want that. Now they want to pretend that they finally believe in a level playing field after they killed the solar, the wind, and the all-electric vehicle revolution for the last 5 decades in a row. In other words, all of this didn't just unfold in the last 10 years because we invented solar and invented wind and electric. No, we finally opened up the marketplace for it that had been blocked by the special interest, by the oil, gas, and by the way, the auto industry as well. So now that we've got the revolution on, they are shaking in their boots that it's moving way too fast, and it's proving to be very popular with the American people, and the rest of the world is supporting it. By the way, last year, more money was invested in solar globally than in oil for the first time in world history, and it's only going to get bigger. And last year, globally, 83% of all new electricity was wind and solar. 83%. So they just hate hearing those numbers. And so that's what they want to shut down. That's why H.R. 1 was a repeal of all of this, because they can see how rapidly this revolution is building itself into the economy of the United States and the world.
Last question, got about a minute left. You mentioned this revolution has started, but also no one should be spiking the football. Where are we going? Where are we headed in the next 5-10 years?
We're heading inevitably, inexorably towards a clean energy revolution. The only real question is the pace at which we move.
Right.
Trump's going to try to slow it down. The House and Senate Republicans are committed to the repeal of the IRA, of the climate revolution. But I don't think they're going to be successful. I think Joe Biden will run on that issue. I like that contrast between Trump saying that he wants to kill wind and solar, all electric vehicles, battery storage technologies. Samsung won't be happy about that. They're building a battery factory out in Northern Virginia with the tax breaks. They're not building it in Korea. They're building it right here. So we're going to have millions of jobs built here because of the IRA, and Donald Trump is going to say, no, just stop it right now. I like the contrast. We're going to win, and we're going to see the revolution accelerate even further, but it's going to be, we're going to save all of creation by engaging in massive million job creation in the United States.
The planet is on the ballot. We'll end on that note. Senator, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks to Senator Markey. Next, we have today's final speaker to bring us the state perspective, which we've talked a little bit about today, but we'll talk about it more. Please join me in welcoming Paul Pinsky, Director of the Maryland Energy Administration. Hey, Paul, please take a seat. Governor Westmore appointed you.
Yep.
You served in the state Senate. What are the governor's goals in Maryland, and how does it work too with federal policy making with the IRA, and what states like Maryland are doing?
That's a big question.
Yes, it is.
The governor's called for 100% clean energy by 2035.
Okay.
And if you couple that with the Climate Solutions Now Act that the legislature passed about 18 or 20 months ago, which I had the honor of sponsoring,
Right.
it calls for reducing greenhouse gases by 60% by 2031.
Okay.
So put together, the more clean energy, the easier it'll be to reduce greenhouse gases. So there's sort of a symbiotic situation there. And as the sponsor of the Climate Solutions Bill, it was sort of an honor for me to be asked by the governor to try to help implement it along with the Department of the Environment. Look, the IRA has been very helpful. Two of the formula grants we'll be receiving are about $134, $135 million over 4 years. There are other competitive grants we haven't heard about yet. Solar for All, our state green bank has applied for that. So there are a number of things in play. Now, it's unclear when actually the money will flow. They're still setting guidelines at the Department of Energy. But we're going to use that money to increase energy efficiency and to electrify. We think there's a big future in heat pumps, moving away from gas and oil in some cases, and particularly using a Justice 40 lens. The impoverished communities, those that have been overburdened and underserved for many years in our state, mostly black and brown communities. And that was not a lens that was used previously to this administration. So we are very committed to all of our projects, whether it's federal money or state money, and we give out about $100 million a year through the MEA, my agency, and we are making sure that the investments go to those communities as well.
Do you talk to other states? Do you learn from other states?
Yeah, but look, it's an uneven situation. Some states are here, some are here,
yes.
Some are ignoring the whole situation, unfortunately. But look, there are states, Massachusetts, California, New York, that have done great work. And we would like to be in the forefront. It's for others to judge where we are.
Now, as I mentioned, you served, the lead sponsor. How did serving in the state Senate help you in your post now?
Well, I served in the legislature for a lot of years. We're a part-time legislature.
Right.
So I felt for me personally, it was time to go from legislating to implementing, to be a little more accountable.
Right.
Some people say, you can run wild when you're a legislator. You can demand anything, and it may or may not happen.
But you're right, the implementation doesn't get the attention it deserves.
No, for sure. And that's okay.
Right.
We've gotten headlines. I've gotten headlines for years. It's okay.
Right.
Look, it took us 2.5 years to pass the Climate Solutions Now Act, and it was one of the leading pieces of legislation in the country. It calls for large buildings to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2030 and fully by 2040. So it's called BEPS, Building Energy Performance Standards. And look, is there some pushback? Of course there's pushback. People aren't quite ready to do it. And the Department of the Environment that's actually developing the plan for implementing the climate solutions, which should be released in the next week to 10 days, it's going to have ramifications for the whole state in every sector. It's not going to be an easy lift.
Okay.
It's not going to be an easy lift to reach the 60%. It's not going to be an easy lift to reach the governor's goal of 100% clean energy by 2035. Unfortunately, where we thought there were tailwinds, they're now turning into headwinds at the moment.
Well, what did you think of what came out of COP28?
Cautiously optimistic. I personally would have liked a stronger solution.
You're not alone.
No, I know that,
Right.
and I have to temper some of my comments.
Right.
Yeah, look, The energy sector is very powerful. You know, they had apparently thousands of representatives there. You know, and the Mideast has their own interests.
Right.
You know, they want to keep the oil flowing. It's a conflict, you know, and how quickly we move. I heard Senator Markey. It's a matter of speed. You know, what does that transition look like? How long will it take? How many people are going to drag their feet? At what point do we have to say, you got to do it? You know, we're trying to move in Maryland to say, we'd like you to do it voluntarily, but if we have to say it's going to be done by 2030, like the greenhouse gas reductions, it's got to be done.
Right.
You know, I mean, we have to put fossil fuel aside. We have to move towards electrification. We have to move towards heat pumps. We got to grow solar. You know, we need to grow offshore wind, although there have been some challenges along the East Coast in the recent months. So, look, there's momentum, but there's also some pushback. And I think that's exactly what we saw in the Middle East. Look, islands are being lost. I mean, it's true. You know, and some Western European countries have moved significantly. You know, obviously they have not been. You know, they've moved away from gas for a long time because it's expensive. You know, and you know, a gallon of gas has always been expensive there. You know,
right.
So look, it's a challenge.
Sure.
But we in Maryland want to try to implement it in a very concrete way, and I think that's one of the focus. And we work with the Department of the Environment. You know, we're Energy Administration. We're in the same building. Okay. Our offices are down the hall. They're much larger. But we got to be aggressive. You know, that's all there is to it. You know, and if we have to push, we have to push. It's just, you know, it's not a time for dragging our feet.
What is the role, and maybe you can speak to this over the years, of how you've seen technology come and where it's going, but the role of whether it's AI or new technology in helping policymakers achieve their goals?
No, that's a very important point. You know, solar is a perfect example. It was very expensive. You had to buy it from Asia, but prices come down pretty significantly.
After some time, yes.
You know, but it's taken 30 years for that price to come down. Electric vehicles is another example. You know, the cost of an electric vehicle has actually come down pretty significantly. Still a little bit more, so now we're stuck with a question of infrastructure. You know, and one of our goals has been to make sure the infrastructure to be able to battery up is not just in detached suburban homes, but we have to look at the city and multifamily units, apartment buildings. Is the infrastructure there? I mean, in other words, the cost has come down where it's actually affordable for working families, for some of the smaller cars.
Right.
But do they have the infrastructure to want to buy it? So in other words, are there enough chargers and parking at apartment buildings in West Baltimore, for example? You know, we know the last 10 years have seen greater sales in the middle class and the upper middle class, primarily the white communities. You know, and in their suburban homes, they will do the upgrades, you know, where they can have a level 2 in their garage. But that's just not in place yet for a lot of our poorer communities. So again, it's using that Justice 40 equity lens in our work. So look, there's more work to be done. Solar has come forward. Turbines have come forward, but unfortunately, international financing, availability of ships to do it has slowed it down. We saw what Ørsted did pulling out of New Jersey. We have a commitment from them, goes back a few years. We hope they complete their commitment and investment, but there are a couple of states where it's up in the air, you know, and things have slowed. Dominion and Virginia's moving ahead. But there are other things on the future agenda. You know, storage is clearly a key area. You know, only being able to store energy for 4 hours, it's just not enough. But there are exciting things happening. We funded a number of schools in the state of Maryland where we got them from scratch. We got an architect, and they're net zero. In other words, before they were built under the soccer field, they put geothermal. In the building, they used heat pumps instead of gas or oil, and they also used solar. So here's a school that is actually generating more energy than they're utilizing. And the marginal cost was not that large. You know, and I think people have to think proactively, you know, before they put that shovel in the ground.
Yeah, and that was the question I was going to ask you. What are the arguments that, as you know, this debate has moved significantly?
Yes.
You know, at one point, people were disputing that the Earth was getting warmer and that it wasn't man-made. Okay, by and large, we moved beyond that.
We sort of have. I was on a panel last week where a national figure actually put a slide deck where it was basically a denier presentation, and this is in December of 2023.
But the role of stakeholders, and when you mention a school where they make reforms, energy reforms basically, is that where you're able to convince, some people you're never going to be able to convince, obviously, the energy industry, and but some you can, and what are the most convincing arguments? Is it examples like that to say, listen, if you invest this, it's going to lead to this, we've proven it?
Well, we in fact have committed, at least on a modest scale, to pay the marginal cost. So it's not even additional cost to the money they would spend on building the school anyway.
It's less.
Some of my former colleagues have introduced legislation mandating it, requiring any new school must be net zero.
Okay.
So, and that, you know, Maryland's been progressive in that sense. Now, it hasn't passed, and we are now talking to the 24 superintendents saying, look, we have money, you have a project, we'll pay the marginal difference. We'll pay the money to put solar on your roofs if you're putting in a new roof. So there's got to, you know, look, incentives and doing it voluntarily is preferable. But just like, you know, we did with the Climate Solutions Bill, sometimes you have to say enough's enough. This is how it's going to be done. Mm-hmm. And then we found, you know, if you say we want a green school, the architects will design to that. And when they put their plans to the builders will build to that, and it gets done. Right. You know, it's doing it the first time that's always the challenge, moving out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Once you've done it another way, it's going to speed up, I mean, just rapidly, as we can see. It's just people are stuck in the old way of doing things, you know, in many sectors. And we have to sort of move them out of the comfort zone. And once they get out of the comfort zone, and if it's not additional revenue during a tight time when they can barely fund schools or, you know, education, police, whatever, if money's not an issue, they need the nudge to take the next step. And we're trying to do it gently in Maryland or by mandate.
Got about a minute left, but you mentioned Senator Markey saying we're going to make progress. It just depends on how quickly we make progress. If we don't make progress quickly enough, what are the ramifications?
You know, I used the example in the Middle Ages when you had the bubonic plague, and they were pulling bodies from houses. Okay. If that were the case today, we'd be moving like that. Right. But it's much more subtle, you know, climate change, you know, a storm here, a flooding here, and it's not like people are in a wake-up mode of, my God, we have to do something today. Right. You know, it's just more nuanced. To many scientists, it's not so nuanced. You know, whether it's fires, whether it's flooding, severe storms, you know, we read about it every day. It's becoming a common day occurrence. So that's one of the challenges, is convincing people it's going to affect all of you, not just in terms of physical health, but economically. Sure. You know, when a state stops writing insurance for floods, whether North Carolina or Florida, that's affecting the economy. So
and that didn't used to happen. That's a relatively new phenomenon.
And I think we're going to see more of those examples. Yeah. I think it's just emblematic of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul, thanks for joining us so much.
My pleasure.
Please thank Paul for joining us this morning. Thank you. Let's hand it back to Sarah. Yeah. Close it out.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you to all of the wonderful speakers this morning. And on behalf of The Hill and our sponsor, Samsung, we'd like to thank everyone who joined us here and online. If you missed any portion of today's discussion, the full event video is available on thehill.com. Additionally, our friends at Samsung, in the back of the room by the coffee bar, they'll be demoing their SmartThings app, their energy-efficient SmartThings app. There's also a lot of fun things to take a look at in this room as well. So please enjoy yourself. Thank you.